Good morning, welcome back. This is Daybreak and thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Our main theme of the day is, of course, whether the pledges are being met to the young Kenyans across the country. And one significant one has been before the elections, the Kenya Kwanza Charter with the youth, with a promise to returning a standalone youth ministry to cater for the needs of the youth if elected to government. The coalition said in its charter that the youth also are promised to support creative, digital, sports and in the sectors of agriculture with the aim of encouraging the youth to engage productively in this field. So did the Azimio also in its manifesto, which had comprehensively advocated for the conducive trade and business environments by reducing business costs for youth-run entities through subsidization of taxes and licensing fees for the first year of business and mobilizing resources to develop local industries, and the long list of the pledges made by both entities of the political divide. But first, I will take the account to the effect of what's happening in the country, and with me in studio is Irene Otto, who is an advocate of the High Court. Thank you for your time. So is Charles Mugani. Your time is all appreciated. Also an advocate of the High Court. Nora Bosibori, commentates on youth policy affairs. Thank you for your time. So is Brenda Kangai. Thanks for your time as well. And Philip Pande, who advocates for youth inclusion into matters of governance. Your time is appreciated, Philip. Mohammed Abdullahi is a law student. The front page of the Daily Nation says talks on the National Dialogue Conference and what Ruto Raila deal means for the country. It says the conclusion of the bipartisan report this month is likely to bridge the gap between the government and the opposition, as both sides are expected to rally their troops in parliament to approve the joint proposals. But even as Dr. Ruto and Mr. Odinga gear up for a close working relationship to address issues affecting Kenyans, this could have far-reaching political ramifications in both camps. And that story is further highlighted on pages number 4 and 5, with DP Rigathi Gachagua and rebel ODM MPs will find themselves in difficult situation, says the paper on the front page. First, coming to Brenda, what do you make of this? Has it been wholly inclusive in terms of this entire process which ended and co-chaired by Kimani Ichung'wah and Senior Counsellor Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka to accommodate the views of young Kenyans like you are?
First of all, thank you so much. For those who don't know me, Brenda Kangai. I'm a youth from Mount Kenya. Most people refer me as Msichana wa Mlima Kenya. And I want to say something about the bipartisan talk. For me, I think it was a waste of time. It has nothing to do with Kenyans as far as the talks are concerned. And we really tried as youth. I was part of those youths who volunteered, who joined my party leader, His Excellency Raila Odinga, on the streets, so that we can fight for the rights of Kenyans, and you can even ask the government to reduce the cost of living. But even after Mr. William Ruto and his government promising us a bipartisan talk, we see that it is even becoming worse. For instance, as we are speaking today, hawkers are not allowed even to be in town. The price of unga has gone up. The price of fuel has gone up. So for me, I think bipartisan talk is not going to help Kenyans, and my message to my party leader, His Excellency Raila Odinga, he should step behind that bipartisan talk and think about Kenyans and now give us the right way, because I think these people are wasting our time. Because if Mr. Ruto meant something about bipartisan talk, today, Ayub Abdikadir, as we are speaking, the cost of fuel should be below 150. We are buying fuel at over 200 shillings. A common citizen, a common mamamboga, a common mtu wa mkokoteni, mtu wa baiskeli, the person who was promised lies in campaign, that person is struggling. That person cannot even afford a meal in a day. For me, I think we really tried as youths and the youths that we volunteered to at least fight for the rights of our citizen. But I think Mr. Ruto is a liar. He should just come with promises that he knows he can keep. And I want to tell the president, Mr. William Samoei Ruto, instead of you talking too much, giving Kenyans promises day after day. Yesterday he gave a promise, today is going to give, tomorrow is going to give. At least do something. Don't talk. Kenyans are starving. Kenyans are struggling. We want to see something. We want to see action. At least we want to wake up and see the president giving a press briefing and saying that I've reduced the cost of fuel to 150. I've reduced tax. Okay. Today, a youth who is importing goods cannot even sell those commodities in Nairobi.
Okay.
You import goods worth 1 million, you are taxed 500,000. Which business will you do?
Okay. Charles, what do you make of this in terms of assessment? I mean, this report will come out, but do you firmly hold in your heart that it will address, one, largely our national problems as a country, and then two, with a major focus on addressing some of the problems that are affecting young Kenyans like you are?
For sure, I do not think that this has anything to do with what the youth are facing in terms of the challenges. I do not think that this dialogue at all will serve to help or to assist the needs of the youth. What I think is we have so much on paper, we have so much in terms of the laws. As to whether those laws are being implemented, that's another thing altogether. So I don't think, I think it's a facade, so to say.
Mm-hmm. Nora, what do you make of this? I mean, we are there after every electoral cycle. We seem not to sufficiently address the uncertainties after every electoral cycle. Is this, in your view, one that will address our problems?
First, thank you, Ayub, for the opportunity once more. What's happening in Bomas is a political process. It's not an economic rejuvenation framework. And so to speak, we are back in what has been happening over time. These issues of dialogue did not start with President Ruto. All the past 3 presidents have had dialogue. For example, you remember in the Moi government, we had the cooperation government. In Kibaki government, we had the coalition. In Uhuru Kenyatta's government, we had the handshake, and now we have the bipartisan talks. Mm-hmm. And all these are just majorly political processes. And what we should ask ourselves, the pertinent questions are, why do we come back to talks after every cycle? Is it a problem and gaps within our constitution? And how do we define those gaps and be able to fill them? For example, our constitution stipulates that the president, of course, once elected, then kind of forms government and then stipulates what happens within his government. So I think this approach of winner takes it all is what is ailing all of us. And then now the whole population of people who did not vote for the president feel like they have been left out. So they come behind the person maybe who came second to kind of agitate for other issues. So in the long run, then we lose focus. Instead of coming together to build the nation economically and socially, instead now we concentrate on the political processes. So I think the bipartisan talks are a good thing, what is happening, but then it only takes care of our political system. It leaves out all other aspects of our economy, of our youth, of our women, of our education, and so many other sectors. So we kind of perpetually concentrate on politics, whereby once we finalize on one election cycle and we start campaigns and discussions on the next presidency or elections in the next year. Like right now, people have started campaigning on a very, very high gears. So what we can then be able to understand is that as a country, we have to find a different framework. And then you see also this issue of winner takes it all does not augur well with the people, because it doesn't not bring about inclusivity. Because you have seen how the top leadership, very serious people in government, coming up with divisive and condescending statements about the country's ownership. Yet, as now the people who are leading the country, you're supposed now to lead everybody, the whole population of the country. So when we have these pronouncements being made by the top leadership, then it means that we have to go to the drawing board and look at our constitution and understand what is the role of specific people within the framework. Okay.
Philip, how do you, she mentioned a very pertinent point, the question of winner takes it all, and it has come up again and again. I mean, one of the pillars of the Building Bridges initiative was that question. And still it appears that the National Dialogue Committee, when it had submissions from many entities and stakeholders, the focus was more on how to address that particular problem. I mean, what's the formula and what do you think is going to be the fix to that problem of the winner takes it all, which is consistently mentioned by politicians and the top leadership in the country?
Very well, Ayub. Many thanks once again for having me. It's been about 2 months of absence from this show. But in connecting with what my colleagues here are saying today and in the past events, is that fundamentally, the bipartisan talks have departed from what we thought as young people in terms of inclusivity. When we talk about the winner takes it all, who is the winner? It's, of course, the president, but the president is supposed to reflect the face of Kenya, the face of the 42-plus communities that we have in this country, and to be the father figure in this country. If that does not happen, and that does not happen in the sense of involving young people, Ayub, in cabinet, in government, in decision-making roles, then we have a huge challenge. But going to our governance processes and infrastructure, I was a fundamental supporter of BBI for the reason that it talked about issues that I thought were pertinent to inclusivity of young people, of communities, of counties, and of resource allocation, particularly above 35% that we suggested in the document. Now, the bipartisan talks are a reflection of the BBI. It's a continuation of that process. And Ayub, if you ask me, this will end up at some point, if not sooner, but at some point in our history, there will be a referendum in this country. And that referendum has to address two key issues. How do we deal with opposition politics in Kenya? Do we return the position of the official opposition leader in the Constitution, which is a key issue in the points that we are discussing today?
Okay.
And do we entrench it in Parliament? If we solve that, partly we solve the issue of the winner takes it all. So that if I were a supporter of a losing candidate who did not make it to the presidency, I still feel that I'm represented authoritatively in Parliament and in the governance infrastructure.
But Philip, when you mention the feeling of representation, Katiba states that we have the majority and the minority sides. Yes. For instance, you have no Raila Odinga, who came second in the presidential elections in Parliament, but you have Opiyo Wandayi, who leads the minority wing of the National Assembly. So clearly, there are clear blue voters even in Parliament that the Constitution has established. Here are we focusing then more, Philip, from your suggestion and proposal, a more focused approach to address that problem when we focus on the personality and what happens after an election, say in 2027, if the candidate who came second is not interested in being in Parliament, what happens to the already created framework where there is the majority side and there is the minority side? Don't you feel represented, for example?
Ayub, if you remember last year on our last show during Daybreak, we talked about the role of Opiyo Wandayi as the minority leader, for example, and the presence of the official opposition leader, in quotes, Raila Odinga. Yeah. If I am Azimio and I have Opiyo Wandayi in Parliament, and if I'm Azimio and I had Raila Odinga in Parliament, there would be a fundamental difference in the representation of these two people, even in terms of commanding the opposition MPs, even in terms of whipping people to vote for particular bills and support a cause. So what we are saying, and I would tell you, Ayub, that politics is about personalities. It's not about really the political parties and what we have in them. I am a supporter of William Ruto because of who he is. I am a supporter of Raila Odinga because of who he is and what I think that they represent. So if I have a party leader that I feel should be my president, and they fail to be president, I still look up to them as a leader that I want to follow. And I want to follow them not just outside Parliament, but inside Parliament and in government.
But you agree with me, beyond the personalities, also it's important we focus on the structure of the political parties, what the party stands for, what it champions for, and therefore not necessarily with a major focus on the personalities, because we are all mortal. At some point we have to leave, and therefore it's better to create the structural, changes needed in a political party system where the party thrives and for the long term, more than even the individuals who are the party leadership. I think that's an important point that we have to be clear about.
It is. In one of the oldest parties in this country is KANU. The other one is Ford Kenya, which is, the second liberation, party. And they thrive because I believe that they had a manifesto, they had a philosophy that they kept on driving.
Yeah.
Ford Kenya was, a multi-party democracy party.
Yeah.
ODM is a multi-party democracy and reforms party. What does, for example, other political parties stand for? One of the things that the bipartisan talk seeks to solve is fidelity to political parties. But what is fidelity to the political parties? It's about the philosophy, it's about the beliefs, it's about the aspirations of the political parties. Are you a leftist? Are you a right?
We'll talk more about that and the discipline needed because we'll concentrate more on that in the next 1 hour. Coming to you, Irene, briefly, what do you make of the committee which has ended its sittings at the Bomas of Kenya? Is it coming up? Is it going to come up with a report that will address our problems?
Thank you. If we go back a little, remember that one of the issues that really was nagging Kenyans, it's a high cost of living. So when the bipartisan talks began, that agenda was not even included in that. It was not in the agenda. So the people started thinking, what are they going to talk about if they are not going to address the issues of citizens? It turns out they were going to talk about how they can, different parties can be included in the government. And also later, that's when they thought, okay, there are other issues we need to address. So at this point, you are thinking, are they going to really address those issues? We are yet to see it. So we are waiting for the report to actually see what they've been doing all this time and whether they really sat down to consider, our issues. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Mohammed, do you think the pressing issues of the public will be reflected in the final report by the Shungwa and Kalonzo Musyoka-led committee?
Thank you. I think at the top of that list, probably, with the prevailing times, is the cost of living and the surging prices of everyday commodities, fuel prices. I do not think that the report that is going to come from that committee is going to address that particular economic issue. This, as Nora says, wasn't an economic initiative. It was a political one. It might address our political problems, but it will do very minimal to address this economic problem. Understandably, the push to include the cost of living crisis in the committee's talks came from the Azimio side. It did not come because they have the interest of citizens at heart. It is because it's a good political speaking point at this particular time, and especially against Kenya Kwanza's side. Kenya Kwanza was heavily opposed to that. I do not think, how will they address that? The rising fuel prices is heavily because of taxes. Why do we need more taxes? Because the country is heavily in debt. We need to collect more and we need to pay all of these things. That would hardly be addressed. But I do think it will address one key problem, which is a political problem, which is that when the political elites in this country fight, and when they are at loggerheads, it is bad for the economy, it is bad for everyday citizens. When they sit together at the table, albeit at the expense of citizens again, because they eat together and they do all of these things, I think it is better for the stability of the country, at least for business to thrive and for the economy to be working.
Okay, thank you. When we get back from the break, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be focusing on the main agenda and the pledges made to Kenya's youth, who, according to the Kenya Population and Housing Census, below 35 years were 35,700,787. Those who were between the ages of 18 and 34 constituted or made up 13,777,600. And they are largely unemployed, and they still decry the same even in the midst of new administration. So was the case even with the previous administration. So where is going to be the easy, immediate fix to their problems? More after the break here on the broadcast. Stay tuned.